Hi, I'm Carl Franklin. In this episode of Blazor Train, I'm going to show you how to do basic authentication and role-based authorization in a .NET 8 Blazor web app in global server mode using the ASP.NET Core Identity System. Now, if you're interested in the demos that I've done on Auth in previous versions of .NET, you can find them linked in the show notes here on YouTube. So this demo covers Blazor web apps with the interactive render mode set to server, and that means all the code runs on the server. In subsequent episodes, I'll be covering WebAssembly and even auto render modes, so stay tuned for that. Basic Auth in Blazor Server is coming up right now, right here on Blazor Train.
Blazor Train!
Okay, as I said, this is going to be a Blazor web app .NET 8 in global server mode. This is perhaps the easiest template that you can choose if you're going to do auth, authentication, and authorization. So we're going to start here, and then in subsequent videos, we'll progressively get into the other scenarios. The good news is that in .NET 8, in the Blazor web app template, the authentication authorization UI has been significantly improved. We went from server-side Razor files to Blazor components, which, as you know, can exist anywhere. All right, so we're starting with a new project, a new Blazor web app, and I'm going to call it Blazor 8 Auth Server. Next, I'm going to pick the authentication type, individual accounts, and this is going to configure the scaffolding for everything that we need in our .NET 8 project. Also, as I said before, server mode, interactivity, location, global will include the sample pages. Okay, now if you look at app settings JSON, they have given you a database name and a connection string, local DB, right? And the database is going to be called ASP.NET - whatever your project name is, and then a GUID. So you can just simplify this if you want. I will simplify it. And now this database isn't actually there yet. Take a look. If I go over to my SQL Object Explorer and I expand my databases, you'll see I only have a couple of sample databases in there. So this is how you do that. You go down to the Package Manager console and simply say update-database. And it's done. Now if I refresh databases, here's my Blazor 8 Auth Server database, and it's got all the tables in there that you'd expect. Now, believe it or not, I can just run this sample app, and you'll notice that they've added some other stuff here. Here's a page where authentication is required. So when you go there, they're saying, hey, you should either log in or register as a new user. And they routed you to the login page. And if I register as a new user here or here, I can just create a new account. The next part requires validation, email verification, if you will. And it tells you right here, the app doesn't currently have a real email sender registered, and the documentation link shows you how to set it up. But if you just click, that will confirm your account. Now, here's what it actually does. If I look in my ASP.NET Users table, you can see up here that email confirmed is a field set to false. As soon as I click here to confirm the account, and I refresh, now email confirmed is set to true. And you can consider this user confirmed. This will happen within the course of an email verification process. At the end of it, the email will be confirmed. Okay, so now I have an account. Now I can go to auth required. Now, why doesn't it show me anything? Well, we registered, but we didn't log in. So let's log in. Now here's our very special authentication required page. You are authenticated. Okay. Now, we can do some other stuff here. Look at this. All this UI is now Blazor components in .NET 8. So you have the profile, right? Your email, your password, turn on two-factor authentication, personal data. All of this stuff is right here. So let's see what we can do now that we have been authenticated. The other part of this is authorization. And that is, now that you're authenticated, we know who you are. What can we allow you to do? That's what authorization answers. Now, you would think that role-based authorization is built in to the Microsoft account here, and that maybe I should just have some tools to be able to manage all the users and add roles and add them into roles and actually run code that checks for roles. And yeah, you can do it, but it's not built into the template. Here's what you have to do. Go to Program CS, and right here where you're adding Identity Core, before the line Add Identity Framework Stores, you're going to say Add Roles, Identity Role. And now you can use roles. You can check to see whether a user is in a role and authorize markup and code based on that. But how do you actually add roles? How do I create a role and how do I add somebody to it? Well, it's not as simple as going to the roles table. Let's look at the columns. User ID, role ID. This is for user roles, and we have another one that's just roles, which is the role name, a normalized name, a concurrency stamp, because there's all these things with the concurrency stamp and everything that it's really hard to do manually, and you shouldn't be editing the database manually. So luckily, and if you've seen previous versions of this on Blazor Train, you know that I have a special library that I've created on GitHub with a demo app that allows us to manage users and roles. And it's called Identity Manager Library. Now, it is a library that you can use in any application to manage users and roles, but we have created both an Identity Manager Blazor Server app so that with this Blazor Server app, you can just run it and manage users and roles. And then we have also created an application that is restricted based on those users and roles. This is still .NET 7, however, but it's still going to work. So I'm going to pull this down and run the Identity Manager Blazor Server application. Okay, so I'm in the Identity Manager Blazor Server project. And if you look in App Settings JSON, what you have to do before you run this is set the database in the connection string to the same name as the database that our app is using, because it is going to, you got it, access that database and let us manage roles. So let's run this and see what we got. Okay, so we go down here and we select Create Role. And I'm just going to create one called Admin. It's really just a name, right? Now, if I go to Users, you can see here's my username. And if I edit this user, now I can add myself to the admin role. But I'm not going to do that quite yet. Let's go back to our other application. And in Components, Layout, Nav Menu, what I can do is I can say that this page right here, auth required, I don't even want to show this nav link, unless I'm authenticated. So I can say authorize view and whatever I want to put in there if I'm authorized. This is step one. And now when I run this, you can see I'm not logged in and I don't even see that page because the authorized view has prevented it from being shown. So now if I log in, there it is, auth required. Now I can further restrict this by saying roles equals admin. So now I'm not even going to see it unless I'm logged in and I'm in the admin role. Now, I have to log out if I'm going to add myself to the admin role. All right, now let's go back to our role manager. I'll add myself to the admin role. Now back at our application. If I'm logged in, I have to log out and then log back in again. That's how I can get that claim, that role claim. So I'll log in again. There I am. Auth required works because I'm in that role. Okay, now if I log out, come back here, remove myself from that role, log in again, now I don't see it, right? This is all my manage account stuff, but it's not there. All right, so that's how we can use the authorize view with roles to limit what markup the user can see based on their role. But what about an entire page, right? What if instead of putting authorize view here, right, around this guy right here, what if we want to go to that page, that auth page, and you see this attribute authorize? Well, that's what requires authentication. But how do we add role-based authorization here? Just like that. Roles equals admin. Now let's go back to our identity manager. We are not in the admin role. Okay? So when we run this, let's log in. Now I can try to navigate to auth required, but when I go there, boom, it's going to bring me to the login page automatically because I'm not logged in. Now, alternatively, we could use an authorize view here and say authorize view roles equals admin and put all this goo right there. And now we have this subcomponent. I can say authorized, and that's where we put the goo if you are authorized. Otherwise, we have not authorized. You are not authenticated, right? And so we can go here. Oops, let's get rid of that. We can navigate here even if we're not authorized because we took the authorized view off of the nav menu. But we can't actually see the page unless we've been authenticated. And this should be, authenticated. In other words, there's no authorization here except that you're authenticated or not. That's the only rule. Okay, so if you are authenticated and you're in the admin role, then you're going to see this. Otherwise, you're going to see that. Now remember, we are currently not in the admin role. So let's run it and see what happens. I'm not authenticated. All right, let's log out. Go back here, add myself to the admin role, log back in, and happy, happy, joy, joy. Okay, for the next demo, I'm going to take myself out of the admin role to begin with. So let's look at something like counter. I know, another counter demo. Carl, you're killing me. All right, well, bear with me. So the whole page could be allowed to everybody, and you can use authorize view to show markup based on whether you're authenticated or in a role or both. But what about in code? What if I only want to allow people in a certain role to be able to increment the counter, right? So I need to do some code checking here. How can I do that? Here's how. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. So you want to add a cascading parameter, which is a task of authentication state. And from that, you can pull out the principal, which has the user's roles and things on it. Okay? So here's what we can do here. Only allow the user to increment the count if they are authenticated and in the role of counter clicker. So yes, the first thing I do is I get the state from authentication state task result, and then I get the user, and then I check if user is in role counter clicker. Then I'm going to allow this. Otherwise, well, I could do nothing, or I could show a message. But yeah, okay, I'll show a message. And right here, we'll set message to an empty string. And down here, we'll say else. Message is you are not authorized to click the button. Okay, a silly demo, but you get the idea. This is very different from using an authorized view, right? This is checking at the code level when you want to do something. Is this user in this role? And only allow them to click if they're in that role. Okay, let's try it now. So let's log out and log back in again. Okay, I'll go to counter. I'll click the button. I'm not authorized to click the button. I'm actually logged in, but since I'm not in that role, I can't do it. All right, so let's check it out. Let's create a new role, counter clicker, and I'll go to my user and edit, add me to counter clicker. Now we have to log out and log back in again, remember, because we changed the security. Okay, now we'll go to counter, and boom, everybody's happy. So that's basic authentication, authorization using Microsoft ASP.NET Core Identity, built in to the Blazor template in .NET 8. And this was for Blazor Server in global interactivity mode. Now back to you in the studio, Carl. Hey, I'd like to thank my Microsoft friend Jeremy Lickness and the rest of the team for working hard on the new Blazor Auth user interface. It's definitely a lot better than it was, and it's still free. Like beer. Okay, like a puppy, but you know what I mean. Hey, thanks for riding the rails with me today. This is where I jump off. I'll see you next time.
Blaze a train.